listen that presentation about Power BI. Sarah?
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming out on a Monday evening to learn about Power BI. So out of curiosity, how many people here work in data analytics or want to work in data analytics? Oh, great. So quite a few folks. And are there other folks here who maybe you're a manager of a data team or maybe you're an engineer? Okay, great. So today's presentation is called Power BI 101, just meant to give an overview of different things that Power BI can be used for. Let's go on. So one of the first questions is, why use Power BI instead of sticking to Microsoft Excel or sticking to kind of the same manual processes that your organization may have? Sometimes when I come to an organization that is early in their Power BI journey, I tend to see a lot of manual processes. For example, it might be something like a client has asked their data team for weekly or monthly updates to questions such as how much did our stores earn this past week, how much did we earn this month? And so the data analyst writes this manual SQL query that maybe they drop that data into an Excel workbook and manually email that to a team. So, so it might be this manual request and this manual sourcing where somebody is writing this SQL query, and then maybe they're dropping it into an Excel workbook where they're updating the formulas, and even in the SQL query itself, maybe they're updating, the things like date parameters and so on. And then this is another old friend, the Microsoft Excel Refresh All to refresh formulas and charts. And then you also have just the woes of manual delivery where someone is, just maybe there was some sort of migration over the weekend, so they're delayed for getting the information to the teams because they're having to repair some fires that have come up over the weekend, and then, finally they send an email out. And a question that I sometimes get is, well, what's wrong with the manual way if it's been working? Well, when you have something that's manual, you can have a problem where you have just human errors. For example, we see here this person forgot that 2024 is a leap year, so when they were asked to give a full month's worth of data for February 2024, they ended it on February 28th instead of the 29th. It also just takes time, and it's also vulnerable to vulnerable to people being delayed, someone being sick and not making it in. So one of the things that's nice about Power BI is that it automates a lot of that manual, human work that just takes up so much time. For example, one of the things that's nice about Power BI is that it automates kind of extracting data. It automates refreshing the data. It automates getting it out to the people that want it. You can set up automatic emails that go out. You can send a manager a link that they can just kind of click on every Friday, and then they see their report that that's automatically refreshing, for example. Here's another view of how different areas in the Power BI service can look. In the top left here, we have the Power BI desktop, which is where most Power BI developers are going to live. So as you can see here, there is this pane that's called visualizations. And I think I'll just use the mouse to indicate where it is. But yeah, there's a pane called visualizations where if you need something that's straight out of the box, like a bar chart or pie chart, you can just select that. And you also have fields you can drop in, like sales amount, categories, just things that are already in your tables that you can drop in. In the sort of towards the middle on the right side, you have the Power BI service. This is the view that your end user is probably going to live in, where they can, they don't have as much customization because, you might not want them to be customizing a lot, right? You want them to understand the data and to make decisions with it, but maybe you don't want them like making their own visuals, for example. So they can access these visuals that you created for them. And there's also this pane on the side called filters, where they can go in and filter, and if you give them permission to do so, they can go in and filter visuals by different categories, or they can filter an entire page or even an entire report by a specific category also. Another kind of neat view is that Power BI has also introduced this mobile development option where you can select, you can click an interface and just get a view of how your report will look if your user is opening this dashboard on their phone. The other thing I want to point out about the user's view here is at the top, you might see these words, share, subscribe, and favorite. These are just kind of speaking to this Power BI service view being kind of more for the user. They can kind of set up a subscription for themselves or for their teams to have an email automatically go out and kind of send a reminder link to people. And and depending on the permissions that you have assigned to users, they can also share these reports with their teammates as well. So I'm going to actually open up Power BI and see and just show an example of data cleaning. So
is that the desktop or the server?
This is Power BI desktop. And it's opened up on my laptop screen. So I'm going to make it a little smaller so it'll be a little bit easier to drag over. So what I'm showing, pulling over right now is Power BI desktop. So out of curiosity, how many people here frequently use Microsoft Excel? Okay, great. How many people here are familiar with Power Query? Okay, that's a great list.
You can use the upper right-hand corner to maximize it to the screen that you're on.
Right, I did that a second ago, and because it was so wide and it was open on my laptop monitor as well, it just was like, oh, it opened up on the laptop and then no one could. So that's why I'm kind of being a little precious right now with how I'm formatting it. Okay. There we go. So this is the Power BI desktop view. This data here is publicly available City of Houston payroll and budget data. So let's see, let's go to home. And just for the purpose of showing different data cleaning techniques that you can use in Power BI, I'm going to pull over something that's called the Power Query Editor. So how many people here have used Pandas or SQL? Okay, great, that's a great number of folks. So you've probably already done things like having to group, results by certain categories, or maybe there's a manual field and users have, misspelled certain things, so you're having to do a little bit of cleanup for that, or for people not formatting an address the correct way, or so Power Query is also, I would consider it most useful as a data cleaning tool. So one thing that's neat about it is you can select data sources here. Some of the standard out-of-the-box ones are Excel, text files, SharePoint folders. If you want, let's say you have a SharePoint folder that's full of things like payroll data, or that's full of a bunch of CSV timesheet data, you can kind of play around with that and just open it up as one source rather than, so I've seen that you can do really nifty things with that. You can connect to things like SAP HANA. And just you can also connect to certain web sources too. It's pretty nifty. So right now I have connected this to a CSV file. One thing that's kind of quirky about Power Query is it doesn't always automatically recognize your column headers. So often the first step it automatically will do is something called promote headers. And once it kind of recognizes, oh, okay, so department ID wasn't actually a value here, and this field mostly has numbers, you know, then it'll start kind of getting a better sense of what this field is. So that's like kind of one of the neat things about promoting headers. You can also do things like changing a data type. For example, here, department ID, since that's a collection of whole numbers, maybe we want to force that to be a whole number data type, right? Instead of something that is a text data type like department name. You can also do neat things like add custom columns. So here, you know, I quickly added a column that was adopted. This number here, adopted minus current. So, and one of the things that's neat about Power Query is that, you know, we can literally walk through the steps. So even if somebody, you know, never left comments, never left documentation, they should be doing that. At least you can kind of get a sense of what they were doing, right? And, you know, you can do things like change the orders of certain things. I mean, this kind of broke because, you know, there was a new field. We were changing the data type of this new field that was added, and I put it before, but at least, you know, do you see how easy it was for me to just kind of bring it back? And personally, because I've been working with Power Query and M-Code for so long, I'm a little bit more comfortable kind of jumping into the advanced editor and playing around with it here. I also find it a bit faster. However, while people are learning that M-Code, there's a lot in the UI that they can access to kind of help themselves learn. So it's pretty, I would say that it's pretty nifty and for lots of different tools. I would caution, I have heard people kind of disparage Power Query saying, oh, this is for people that don't want to learn to code. And my thought is, well, you know, that's kind of like saying riding a car is for people that don't want to learn how to walk. It's like, I mean, yeah, it might save, like, you know, riding a car does kind of like save time, but I think everyone in here, you know, is like able to get around using a bike or a bus or by walking or running or whatever they need to do. Just because they have a car doesn't mean we're literally dependent on our car to like walk into this room for right now, for example, right? And I also feel there's a lot of, just in real world, a lot of us have data analytics experience. You know, we all know that real world data gets messy pretty quickly. So, you know, it's all well and good to use the UI to learn, but pretty quickly you're going to run into situations where you need, you need to kind of know how to customize things. So that's why I kind of caution people against sort of treating this like something that will replace, you know, learning to code. So let's see. And to play around a little bit with, and we can also play around a bit with Power BI Desktop also. So this is the visualizations pane. When I click on this visual here, that's a bar chart that has quite a few different date fields. You can see that there's these kind of different pools here, like x-axis and y-axis. And if I scroll around here, you can kind of see where, you know, Power BI shows you what was dropped in. Power BI, another feature in Power BI, like one visual that you'll probably use the most often is one called the slicer, where you can go and kind of select different categories or even multiple categories and get a sense, and kind of get a sense of that. Let's see. And I can show another Another Power BI visual that I made as well. But basically, one thing I want to emphasize is that I often see Microsoft sales. I often see people kind of talking up Power BI as something that's low code or no code or meant to kind of make it so people don't have to learn to code. And I can kind of see where they're coming from with that, but my other argument would be that I have heard of organizations that were like, oh, we're going to tell everyone stop using SQL. You're just going to be using Power Query, and you're just going to be using Power BI from now on. And very quickly, that organization learned, oh wait, in the real world, we actually still need people to be doing data cleanup with SQL under the hood, in addition to this. So this is another dashboard that I created just to kind of show a hypothetical cake store and different statuses for cakes and different problems that we're having with different cakes. So this kind of shows in Power BI, in some of the Power BI graphics, you can have things like these little median and center lines that kind of can kind of help the user understand the data. You can also use conditional formatting or things like kind of form or like color coded categories. And here there's a combination line and bar chart. Another common visual that you'll see is something called a card that tends to be kind of just a number. It might be like an average or a total that just you kind of drop in there just to show to the user. And here are some other examples of different kind of the slicer visual and how you can use that to kind of click through and look at different things. So let's see. And now I'm going to, see if I can find my mouse cursor again. So just kind of going back to why use Power BI? So before, you have a lot of manual sourcing, a lot of manual updates and lading, and just kind of the frustrations that can come with bottlenecks that get in the way of manual delivery. Afterward, you have a report that can refresh data up to 8 times a day, and more than that if you go a tier above the Pro license that it seems like most organizations have. You can have automated report delivery through that Power BI subscription or Power Automate. This is an example of a Power BI subscription email. As you can see, it has a little screenshot of the report. It has a link to the report that the person can click to get to it. And also a little blurb explaining, hey, this is why you're receiving this email and what it means. And a link here where the user can manage their subscription as well. There's also customizable options where you can change the subject or the description of the report. So basically, beyond that automated data refresh and delivery, I think another thing that's neat about Power BI is that it's compatible with languages that if you're already in data analytics world, you might already have familiarity with these. For example, a lot of data analysts already use SQL. Some of us probably are familiar with Python and R. If you use Excel, you probably already use Power Query in M. Maybe you already use DAX for Power Pivot in Microsoft Excel. For me, I would say when I'm using Power BI, the 3 main languages I use are SQL, DAX, and M. And I've also seen people use Python and R for data visualization in Power BI. Another thing that I find helpful about Power BI is the option for row-level security. So let's say you are a director overseeing different sales teams, and there's a Power BI report that has, performance and sales data for all these different teams. And you want that sales manager to see his own team's performance, but not the other teams, right? And maybe you want the individuals on that team to see their own performance, but not their fellow, colleagues' performance. So in Power BI, you can set up row-level security so that way people only see what they're meant to see. So maybe as a director, you can see kind of everyone, but your managers only see their own team, and those teammates only see their own personal data. The other thing that I like about Power BI is even if somebody neglected to ever leave a comment, to ever document their code, to ever make a little document explaining what they did, a lot of Power BI in a way kind of documents itself. I've often gotten legacy Excel files where somebody just copied and pasted or just began manually writing things in, so I don't know where this data came from. I don't know where they exported it from. Somebody just began typing in numbers on the side, so they didn't actually export one of the columns. We've all probably run into that. Whereas with Power BI, it's a lot harder to do that kind of ad hoc, messing around. When you kind of extract data from a data source, you're going to be able to see where they extracted it from in Power Query. You're going to be able to see the transformations they applied. If somebody created an aggregation for a column, you'll be able to see that as well. So again, it's ideal if people are commenting religiously and just documenting the business logic behind what they're doing. But I do think that Power BI kind of forces people to leave breadcrumbs a little bit more so than certain other manual processes. And that can be really handy if somebody is suddenly out sick for 3 months or just disappears from the company. You at least have an idea of what they were doing. One thing I will say that can be an issue with Power BI is that it definitely can have a learning curve, even if somebody is very familiar with Microsoft Excel and other Microsoft products. I've had project managers come in and say, oh, I genuinely love writing Excel formulas, so this will be a piece of cake. And then they come to it and realize, oh, wait, this is DAX and Excel formulas are actually pretty distinct. And that also can confuse AI as well. I think AI is incredible, but I'm often having to remind AI that a certain function does not exist in DAX, or it doesn't work the same way in DAX as it would if I were using it, in the context of an Excel formula, right? And just going back to my main emphasis that I would really hesitate to call Power BI low code or no code. I would strongly recommend that anybody who is learning Power BI or coming to it be open to learning SQL, DAX, and M, at least on a beginner or intermediate level, because while there are, ways that you can just kind of click buttons and make things out of the box, just real world data can be messy. It can require transformation and cleaning. So you're just going to have to make certain tweaks and transformations. And I know vibe coding is kind of what a lot of people are talking about right now, but again, ChatGPT can sometimes confuse, Excel formulas and DAX. And one of the other tricky things is that DAX is very dependent on your data model. So, one of the things about Copilot and ChatGPT is that it sometimes doesn't know to ask about what it doesn't know. So you have to kind of be aware of what context you have to give it. So that also I think can make the learning curve a little bit more of an obstacle.
Between the two, how do you drive both? Would you recommend Copilot or ChatGPT for Power BI queries?
I'm going to be honest, I kind of prefer ChatGPT. But I've heard that Claude actually is the most recommended for coding. I haven't tried that with DAX yet, but I'm curious about it. One thing about Copilot is I find that I'll ask it a question and it has a tendency to kind of give me a series of steps that error out. And when I ask it, kind of come back to it in the vibe code spirit and ask, why did you give me these steps and why are they erroring out? It says it doesn't understand the question. Whereas ChatGPT at least will acknowledge, oh, okay, this is what I did wrong, and it'll start kind of working around that. But that's just my experience. I've heard of, I was talking to someone about this a couple weeks ago, and they said that they have the most successful co-pilot when they have another GPT help them prompt engineer. Right? And I mean, I've never, and that's something that, I guess I'll need to try. And again, like the other learning curve for Power BI is that you do have to kind of familiarize yourself with multiple systems, like the Power BI service, the Power Query editor. So there's just so many different features. But I also feel like it's the kind of thing where maybe, one of the ways that I picked it up was just by users asking me for things over and over again. And I would just go online and Google and talk to other people and just start kind of building up my knowledge. And so I think over time, it's kind of like learning to cook, where there's these different skills of how to store food, how to buy food, how to actually, do things like cut up food and chop food, right? And then over time, you just start growing, and before you know it, you kind of have something that feels like second nature, right? And so that would be as far as I have for the presentation. I also have some further reading, just things, and we can kind of go over these as well if y'all are curious about them. If you want to kind of be in a Power BI focused area, there's a Greater Houston Power BI users group that meets at the Microsoft office in City Center once a month, typically on the third or fourth Sunday. They have a meetup group where you can kind of keep up with it. Mike,
Is the Power BI compatible with the MongoDB?
I would think so, but I can check.
It's in the list.
Yeah.
And on your first slide, first couple slides you showed, or actually when you were demonstrating, you showed the data sources, and yes, MongoDB is in there.
Okay, good. Yeah, yeah, because it's compatible with so many, but I also didn't want to say yes and then it's the one that.
You can go back to your example and you can show the data sources.
Sure. So was this in the?
I think it was in your desktop.
Got you. Okay. It was a little bit of a misadventure to drag it over, so I think I'll.
Go ahead.
But I guess it does seem like MongoDB is compatible with it. Were there other questions?
One question is, as I recall, Power Desktop is only available on Windows, it's not on Mac. That's a statement, not a question. Well, it is a question. But as far as I know, the Power Desktop is not available on Mac, period. End of story. It has to be Windows, or it has to be is that true, or do you know?
Let me double check. I do.
They discontinued the Mac version last year.
Interesting,
I
yeah.
think October was when they did it, and I'm a Mac person. Well, I'm also a Linux person, but
Got you.
They know they'll stop producing Macs next year.
I'm sorry? Yeah, yeah, right. Anyway, yeah, if you can go find the external, see where it says get data up there at the top?
Oh, okay. I apologize. I didn't realize this was already open, so I was,
Go ahead and look at the get data.
right. And I'm sorry.
And I thought there was a list of that there. Yeah, there it is, right there.
Like database.
You can tell it, okay, so Mongo's in there somewhere. I
Yeah.
remember seeing it.
It's not late.
Okay.
Okay, so we have
There you go.
MongoDB, Atlas.
There's your answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet.
I know that there's some Mac users at my organization that were interested in Power BI, but to your point, I don't know if they were mostly.
Well, what you have to do is run a Wine emulator or put it in a virtual machine.
Got it.
What have you, or a Docker image or something like that. But they don't have it native, so it kind of adds an extra.
Yeah,
extra bit.
that's a shame. Now that you mention it, I do remember their manager kind of mentioning that to me. That's a shame, I feel like that's going to turn off a lot of people who are kind of in the Mac ecosystem, and maybe they'd be open to Power BI, but
Well, I do both, but, yeah, it was a disappointment that they discontinued it last year, so.
yeah, that's pretty frustrating.
So along those lines, is the web application just for the end user, or can you do the same things you do with the desktop on the browser? You can't do any of that?
Well, it's not that you can't do any of it. Do you want to answer first, and then I can tell you?
I mean, I guess we could, but, so there are some things in the Power BI service that people who maybe have an administrative role might need to do. For example, setting certain user permissions, right? Or, and even the subscriptions, like in an ideal world, the user would set up their own subscription. They would cancel their subscription when they change teams, or when one of their people leaves and changes teams, or they get new people. But unfortunately, it often kind of falls on the Power BI developer, I find. So, yeah, there are.
Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, I feel like most of creating visuals and stuff, that tends to happen for me in Power BI desktop, and it's more just kind of things like setting up user accessibility and setting up the user experience. Maybe some of that, as a developer, I'm doing that in the Power BI service.
So there's no getting around it. You need to have the desktop. To
Yes,
fully.
if you want to do development, you definitely have to have the Power Desktop, the BI desktop. Some of the things with servers you can move to, you can set up your interface, do it in desktop, and then go over to server and say, oh, I want this thing to be over here on the left, or this thing on the right. So you can do things like layouts and so forth, but you can't necessarily specify what the data sources are and that kind of stuff. It's limited. At
Right.
least that's my understanding. Is that sound like?
That's my experience also.
Okay.
Was there another? Hi.
What kind of licenses do you need? Does it work on a free version of the download? Or do you need a license for this?
Oh, yeah.
So if you were learning just for yourself, just kind of downloading it to your personal PC, had no intention of, selling data analytics services using Power BI to anyone else, you're just teaching yourself, you can, I believe you can download Power BI desktop for free, but it's very limited. If you're a business, your business will likely purchase a pro license. Yeah, and there's also something called a Fabric license, which is a little bit more of an upgrade. And it just has more features. So basically, and if you're kind of a business wanting to offer data analytics services, you're probably going to have a pro license or a Fabric license.
Do you have something like community license or something? Community.
No.
Yeah, there is a free version.
There's a free version, but as you pointed out, it's limited.
Right, I would use it, I would recommend the free version more for if somebody was just kind of downloading it just to kind of teach themselves how to use Power BI, for example, but I wouldn't recommend it if you were trying to work as a consultant, for example. I would compare, if you're familiar, are you familiar with Tableau and Tableau Public? No worries, but like kind of how, it's basically the free version is more just, I think, for people who are kind of just teaching themselves. It's kind of limited, unfortunately.
Somebody else? Go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of end users, is it fair to say that Power BI is used mainly for management who just want to see like the overall statistics data, like month-to-month reports and graphs and stuff like that, whereas technical people would still need to use something beyond Power BI, like the alternatives? Like, how would you respond to that in terms of end users? Power BI is only good for like management to see overall reports.
I would say that it depends on what you're creating. I have created high-level overviews for, say, a director or an executive who doesn't need to be bogged down in details. They just need to know, okay, this team is not bringing in profit, or they're just not kind of earning what we're paying them, to be overly cynical and cutthroat, I guess. But I've also built things that are more detail oriented. For example, let's say you have a salesperson and their project is bottlenecked somewhere because we are waiting on a document or something from that salesperson. I've also built views so that way people, individual contributors can see, hey, you have this project and this project that is bottlenecked and it's this much overdue, and this is what you kind of do to need to get this moving. So it just depends on what you create.
Anybody else before I ask, because I've already, go ahead.
I just want to ask about the subscriptions. I was wondering if there's a way to subscribe so you get notifications not just on refresh, but on a refresh that hits a specific data limit or like a field that I want to track. When it hits above 1 million, I want to send out.
Yeah, there's definitely options for that. There's a feature called Power BI Alerts where, and you can even, if you have an end user who is really on board with, learning, you can even set your end user to build kind of their own kind of dashboard and to kind of set up an alert for if this metric is above this amount, that, they'll get like this email alert about what it is. As a developer, you can also create something in Power Automate. If you need something that's very customized for somebody who doesn't want to touch Power BI, they just want an email with the red exclamation point in their inbox when something is on fire, right? You create a Power Automate flow to alert that person once a refresh goes through and a sensitive project or some kind of fire is detected according to what you've coded. Mm-hmm.
I would like to suggest that you add LinkedIn Learning as a resource for training. And LinkedIn is fantastic, by the way. Have you used some of the LinkedIn Power BI stuff?
Yes, I really love Helen Wall's trainings. I used to work for an organization that offered a free LinkedIn Learning access for anyone who just wanted to learn about any topic, which was...
If you have a library card.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Pretty much all the libraries.
all the libraries, you get a LinkedIn.
That, yeah.
With that library card, and of course, library card's free, so.
Right,
I
that's...
want to mention that.
Right, that's what I was about to say. You might get it for free through your company, or if, you don't have a company that offers that, see if your library, try to get a library card from Harris County Public Library, HPL,
How are the Udemy courses?
So I like Udemy. I like the courses that have been recommended to me. I've heard some people be very critical of Udemy, but I feel that if it's, as with any resource, as long as it's kind of well recommended and you can kind of vet who's put it out there, I guess,
But there's Udemy for free from at least Harris County Public Library.
Yeah.
Gale presents.
Yeah, that's great.
We know why free stuff are free, so especially in Udemy.
Tax dollars at work.
But it's cheap.
Yeah, take advantage of your
LinkedIn
tax dollars
is
at work.
just best, better recommendation.
Well, apparently it used to be lynda.com, but they bought lynda.com.
Yes,
So now they have all their courses.
Could you demonstrate how to use the AI query stuff in the existing dashboard that you've done?
So.
You have things set up that you can do that?
Sure, I might do that in a minute, but while we're on the topic of training, I also wanted to make sure to go over some other things. So Microsoft has free official training. If you go to Microsoft, I believe it's, and I have the link to that here, and in fact, if you want to go and get certified in Microsoft certification in Power BI, you can access Microsoft's training for that for free. And that was what I used to get my certification, and I thought it was very helpful for kind of getting a sense of Microsoft's wording for certain questions and the kind of details they pay attention to, because it's one thing to learn on the job and to learn from other analysts that you're working with, but when you're sitting there on test day, it's really, really helpful to just kind of be familiar with how Microsoft describes certain problems and the kinds of details that they pay attention to. I think one of my favorite unofficial references for Power for the DAX language is SQL BI. Their name is a little confusing because they don't really train in SQL, they train in DAX. But they're very detail oriented and very thorough. And they publish a lot of free articles too that are super useful. If you want to practice data visualizations, there's this team called Workout Wednesday. They originally did Tableau data visualizations, but they now also will come out with Power BI focused challenges. So why not learn both or just pay attention to their Power BI challenges?
You're saying that's local meetup or it's online or both?
It's online.
Okay.
Right. They sometimes appear at conferences, but it's more meant to be an online just.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
are you going to be publishing this presentation or at least this page?
yeah, I'm thinking that I might drop it on the meetup page or on my LinkedIn.
Put it as a comment, or you can send me and I will put as announcement.
Okay.
Excellent. I'm particularly interested in this page myself.
It's
So,
good resource.
yeah, it is.
And I also included a YouTube video from one of the SQL BI trainers, one of his opinions on AI and DAX. I do think AI has advanced a bit since this video was created, but I think some of the things he cautions, people about still kind of hold today. If you try to, use ChatGPT to vibe code, just do certain things to double check it, just to be sure. Yeah.
Turn out junk, that's for sure.
Let's see. And I apologize. You were asking me to demonstrate something, but I kind of.
Use an AI query to query an existing dashboard. Do you have it? Can you bring up a dashboard?
Let me see. I'm going to get my mouse over here. I think there is a visual that.
There's a way where you can do, if you have a sales chart, you can say which store has generated more than the following amount. And that's an actual text query that you can bring into, that you can query the existing data set.
So I didn't build this to kind of be able to play with that, be able to interact with that, but there is a visual called the key influencers visual. Okay, and
I need looking at, if you have a dashboard and it has sales figures, there is a way I was asking if you could demonstrate asking a question like, what store produced the most this month?
So
it will go out and find all of that and then this is the store that did it. And I found that to be very useful in terms of being able to query the data.
I think I've seen that demonstrated before. Unfortunately, I don't have a demo for that ready right now.
That's all I was asking.
Yeah, and there is let's see. But there are some options for that are pretty handy.
Okay. I was just asking if you could demonstrate that or show.
Right. I would probably want to kind of format something in advance.
That's fine. You have to do it sometime. There's no
Yeah.
I was just asking if you could show that because I thought it was useful.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? If not, I might close my laptop and.
We might have something more interesting to talk about. Where would you like to use Power BI? What do you think? What is the good?
I retired from Texas A&M after 23 years in IT, and we were starting to use Power BI. And the last thing I was using was, tell me why my bill for AWS is so high. And the AWS does turn out 50 pages worth of stuff and says, okay, here's all the stuff that you bought today. And one particular project was saying, our budget for this month was $500 and our bill was $5,000. Why is it that? And we were able to use Power BI to suck up all the statistics and say, oh, it's because you decided to ask 50 questions instead of 10.
Right.
And those extra 40 generated so much overhead that it cost $5,000 instead of $500. So the idea is to to use Power BI to suck up the performance aspects of a given system and tell you what's happening here. And that example of AWS, that's a real example. They were expecting 500, they got 5,000, and they were like, hey, IT, why the heck is it so high? And you tell them, well, you asked many more questions than you said you were going to, and they're like, okay, we'll ask fewer questions.
Right.
But anyway, so just a class of applications is trying to evaluate existing systems, in this case cloud stuff, to find out, to grab all our statistics and say, okay, what's going on here and how did this happen?
So Open Company, they use this internally for sales pipeline and sales, how that sales department is performing from each geographical location from all across the world. So they then realize and that they compare that this region is doing pretty well in data science, AI, or maybe cybersecurity. So we use it then for analytics as a sales reports, or sales performance for each sales.
That's great. Did you have any idea where you can use it now after that presentation?
In retail also, you can use, like example, that Nestle and P&G is my customer. So we made a lot of big, reports for them, showing the analytics that on the shelf where their products are, competing with other vendors, other providers. And then we use this Power BI for telcos as well, for ISPs and telcos to show their traffic, where's the YouTube traffic is coming from, which region, and showing the complete route, the IP addresses and everything. So there are so many use cases you can use Power BI.
Can we predict stock exchange when it's going up? Kai, what your program software is saying? Are we going to lose more money on stock exchange, or?
Personally, I think we're going to lose more money. Sure. Tomorrow, though, the program says it's going to go up.
Okay, we will check next time maybe. Kai. He had very good presentation, software to control the buying stocks, which might, I mean, it's intelligent a little bit, but we'll see.
Yeah. Find the 8-second period where you can buy or sell.
That is interesting. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
It was very interesting.